Hello, good evening. I have a new fuck suffering group starting in 2 hours. So if you have been on the fence about coming into a group and you want to be my 11th hour surprise person, get in there. Send me a DM. We'll get you in. Tonight, I want to talk about self compassion. I usually talk about ways to cultivate self compassion, but tonight I want to talk about the two easiest ways to depart from self compassion. And these are things I see come up with people in my groups all the time. The two easiest ways to just completely let go of self compassion and step back into self loathing. And they are believing in craziness and believing in laziness. Now, if you just accept that sometimes you're going to feel crazy, sometimes you're going to feel lazy, that's actually the path to replenishment and self-acceptance, then crazy and lazy actually set you free. Crazy and lazy lead to free. Why is self-compassion so important? Because it seems sort of selfish, right? Like, why self-compassion? Aren't I supposed to be having compassion for other people? Isn't that the more ethical thing? Isn't self-compassion just more self-centeredness? For me, I would argue that compassion is actually not an ethical position at all. It has nothing to do with your ethics. Self-compassion isn't something that you work on or try at. Self-compassion is directly related to your receptivity. The more compassion you're open to receive, the more you fill with it and it spills over to others. The more you understand as yourself as a being belonging to the world, the more natural it becomes to care for your co-beings, the beings that are creating you in relationship. We all emerge from relationship. Even if we turn away from relationship, we emerge from that turning away. We emerge from that constriction. We squeeze ourselves out of our minds instead of opening ourselves to expand with the world and to be part of that field of interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh calls it, interbeing. Laziness is probably the biggest offender because we get cultural messages about work ethic all the time. And work ethic, a great work ethic, is absolutely a virtue. You'll get no argument from me about that. But we're also part of a culture that rewards a sense of busyness as a way to not have time to feel that sense of belonging in the world, to not open to those small acts of intimacy with the world around us, both the human and the more than human world. When we have our heads down in our phones or in our to-do list or in all of the things that we feel we need to do, we end up closing, we fold in on ourselves, and we don't allow ourselves to open to that natural sense of belonging. And we have this sense that, oh, we're so busy, and we get burnt out. And we revile replenishment. We refuse to believe that rest is fertile. We believe that if we rest, it's pure laziness, that we're stepping away from virtue. Not realizing that when you keep your kettle on the fire empty, it does nothing but get burnt. You can't make tea from an empty kettle. And we use our lack of laziness as a proof of our lack of craziness. Look how busy I am. I don't have time to feel all the things that make me feel like I'm not in control. So I must be sane because look at what I'm accomplishing. I'm knocking all these things off my to-do list. My goals are flawless. I'm achieving everything I set out to do today. I can't possibly be crazy. Where's the room for anything less than what I'm in control of to come through me. I take away that room. I make no space for energy to come through me that I'm not in control of, that I'm not summoning and directing in really specific ways. And when I do that, I miss out on the spaciousness. And when I miss out on spaciousness, when I clench or I'm living in my head and not in my body, of course I feel like I don't belong. Of course I feel like I have the weight of the world on my own shoulders and my own shoulders alone. I'm no longer open to receive. And self-compassion is directly related to my receptivity. When I can receive, I can give. When I'm clenched, neither happens, and I end up feeling separate. And I end up feeling anxious and depressed. Those are conditions of separation. And they are optional. It is possible to open to that flow of all the life force that comes through you, that when you cap it, and it feels like anxiety. But when you open to it, it's a different experience altogether when it's embodied. It can be really hard to return to softness if there's a lot of trauma responses in your system, if there's a lot of clenching around old stories, if there's like a lot of old beliefs being held about how lovable you are, or about how at home in your body you're willing to feel. When you're not willing to feel at home in your own skin, it's very hard to land there. And if it's very hard to land there, it's very hard to feel the porousness of your skin. It's very hard to feel that spaciousness that's necessary for compassion to come in and out like air. Compassion is like human breathing. It's how we foster relationship. By not getting lost in the clench of judgment. But by understanding that all the creatures, all the human and more than human worlds are our relations. We are in relationship with all of that all the time. And when we turn away from that, it's excruciatingly painful. When we live in the fiction of scarcity, when we believe we don't have enough and we're not okay and we will never be safe. It's so hard to move in love. This idea of safety in so many ways prevents intimacy. When we're asking others to make us feel safe, we're stepping out of trust. We're stepping out of trust in life itself, that life is always holding us if we're still here. Safety is externally sourced. Laziness is externally sourced. Craziness is externally sourced. Crazy is a crazy spiral because once you feel that fracturing of separation, you spiral into more fracturing and separation. And what happens is we end up knitting these ideas of what crazy is and what lazy is. We end up knitting them into our identities. They start out as cultural messages, and then we take them into our selves, our most intimate selves, so completely that we don't even need the external message anymore. Laziness is an excuse, but not in the way I think we often use it. Not in the sense that we need to push ourselves harder, push, force. But that something in us, laziness is this clue that something in us is unwilling to be at ease, is unwilling to be soft, is locked in this belief that clenching keeps us safe. That clenching to the point where we keep the world out is keeping us safe. And that's a fiction. That's what leads to the fragmentation that's real craziness. When we're out of coherence with our essential self. So when are you procrastinating? Because let's differentiate procrastination from laziness too. Procrastination is when you're putting off something that you know is yours to do, in your heart is yours to do. And maybe you're doing a bunch of other things and achieving a bunch of other things to avoid the thing that is truly yours to do. Because something in you is scared of who you would be when no one else is telling you who you are. Because being that person requires a level of constant vulnerability and intimacy with the world that is terrifying at first. To villainize our own bodies for their need for replenishment by berating ourselves and calling that laziness is a fruitless endeavor, and it pushes us further and further away from our life force. We expand the chasm between our lives over here and our life force over here. And then we continue to stand on that precipice and look down with this vertigo and nausea. How can I possibly fill that? How can I possibly bridge that? How did I get so far from who I was meant to be? What happened to that person? What happened to that clarity? How have I gotten so lost in the things that I am being told to do by the external world, by forces outside of me that are not those intimate forces gathering with me, running through me, but the forces of economics, the forces of scarcity, the forces of limitation, the forces of approval rather than authenticity. And stepping back from that can be scary. Stepping back from that can feel crazy. Because the people who are used to you stepping away from your need for replenishment and living in denial of your need for replenishment will start to think you're crazy. What happened to you? You used to be so on top of things. You used to show up for everything. You used to always say yes. What happened? Are you okay? Sometimes that is the most okay place to be. Right there at home in your skin, saying no. That's enough. That's enough. And from that place, you can really serve. From that place where your cup is allowed to fill and then spill, you can move from sincere, compassionate action, not performing compassion so that people will think you're a good person. Because when you start to perform from an ethical position, instead of allowing compassion to emerge from your full cup, you're stepping onto the drama triangle. And when you're performing rescuing, well, to perform rescuing, You need a victim. And is it really compassionate to put someone in that victim role so that you can perform rescuer? Because really, that's a pretty insidious position of one-upsmanship. And there's not a ton of compassion in it, even when there's empathy in it. You can feel into what another person feels. It doesn't mean you're confusing that field and leaking your egoic needs all over them. That's what happens in the rescuing situation. It ends up being very non-beneficial. But to step out of that means to step out of that identity of a good person, of needing that validation of being a good person, and stepping back into your essence, even when the actions that come from that might not at first glance seem compassionate, or they certainly might not seem nice. But to abide in such a deep embodied trust that you understand that even if it hurts in this moment, even if it seems crazy in this moment, that you're moving only from that yes that runs up your midline like a thunderbolt. When all of the beings that constitute you are in consensus, and you are truly moving with all that you are and all that is, that you can trust. And that unfolds over time as deep compassion, not rescuing. So be a little crazy, be a little lazy. There's so much freedom in it. There really is. So if you would like to join the Fuck Suffering group that starts in 90 minutes, come on, send me a DM. We'll get you in. If not, I'll see you here later. Have a fabulous evening. And happy October. Can you believe it's October already? Amazing. So fast time. And so abundant too.